Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is the upper tier, I should say, not the Liverpool podcast. I've been obsessed with Liverpool the last 4 or 5 days in terms of their disappointing me in the transfer window at the moment. But this is the upper tier. This is our weekly transfer show. Joining me again, back again, the Dazzler. How are we, Darren?
I'm good, pal. Yeah,
Good.
I had a little sabbatical there. I wasn't feeling great for a few days, but I'm back in the land of the living, back in transfer or in the transfer world, and back struggling as a United fan. So Liverpool
No
fans,
problem.
you've nothing to give out about. Shut up your whinging. Don't pity the man with no shoes on his feet. Pity the man with no feet.
Well,
Jesus.
we're going to get into this anyway. Just to give you an idea, we're going to be talking about some of these gentlemen. These are some of the guys that are going to come up in conversation today. We're going to do it a little bit differently this week, where I think this week we're going to do 2 shows a week, obviously. The first show, which is the show we do tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to concentrate on the top 6. And we're going to go down through them club by club and see where they're at the moment. And then what I thought we'd do either Thursday or Friday when we do our second show is we might look at everyone outside of the top 6, because I know there's not a huge amount of activity going on out there at the moment. I did expect a little bit more to be happening, but who knows? This week might generate a bit of activity because we're edging closer to pre-season and teams going on tour and various things like that and all. So people really need
Absolutely.
to start doing their business and getting their signings in. So let's begin. We'll begin with Manchester United. There's nowhere else really to begin. Seems to be the hot talk on everyone's lips at the moment. I did a show myself the other day talking about the potential anxiety within the fan base at the moment, albeit we're 3 weeks into the transfer window. Eric's 4, maybe 5 weeks in the job. And patience is key at the moment in this situation, isn't it? But let's have a talk about Man United. And when we talk about Man United, we've got to kick it off with Frankie de Jong.
Well,
What you're thinking on this at the
I'll
moment?
tell you where I'd like to kick it off. First of all,
Yeah,
I've got a few bits. I prepared a couple of bits earlier on, and I've been sorting through and picking through bits and pieces online and tweets and this, that, and the other.
yeah,
But there was a tweet went out today, and it spoke about how United are effectively starting from scratch in this transfer market. They're going off Erik ten Hag shortlist, and they're disregarding most of the recommendations from the scouting department, which is in the process of being revamped. So
yeah.
they had a list in place since January.
Mm,
There was names on the list. There was places they were going to try and go, things they were going to try and do. Ten
yeah.
Hag came in and said, "Not happening on my watch.
Mm,
I want things done differently." And he seems, and it's quite apt that you have those two lads up. It seems as if he wants those two lads in picture, Frankie de Jong and Christian Eriksson, to play as a midfield two for United, and he feels like that's how he can build his team around those two lads. I looked at looking at a little heat map of Frankie de Jong the other day, and something he does quite well is he comes very, very deep, and quite a lot of the time he's picking the ball up off either one of the fullbacks or the centre backs, which would lead me to believe they're going to try and play a lot more football this season. But they're going to get the ball into De Jong, into that double pivot position. He's going to play an awful lot of football. He's going to try and control the tempo of the game. And from there, he will try and get the ball into the guys ahead of him, i.e. the likes of Bruno and the likes of Christian Eriksson. And they're going to be
mm.
the guys who are going to be charged with unlocking defences, unlocking doors, creating chances and stuff like that for the Ronaldos, for the Alangas, for the Rashford Sanchos, and those sort of guys. But De Jong seems to be the one that he's not willing to back off with, he seems to want Frankie, and he's not going to be happy until he's in a red jersey.
Yeah, you've picked up on 2 really good points there that I mentioned the other day in the episode. Even the first thing I mentioned as well is that there's a lot of internal restructuring going on at the moment that
Yeah,
Eric wants done as well. And while that's going on as well, it's really difficult to focus on the external stuff.
yeah,
In terms of the De Jong situation, I mean, obviously he wants this boy no matter what, and I think stories have come out to say he's getting them no matter what. Um, is that kind of, we know he's a fantastic footballer. There's no questioning him as a footballer.
yeah.
Even if you see him playing even for Holland there. He's an incredible baller. He's a great mind for football. And it will be encouraging for United fans to hear that it's possession based football, retaining possession, not being wasteful in possession. I know you've seen it last year with Bruno and all, always trying to play that killer pass every single time instead of the simple pass back or the simple pass side, and being more patient in possession rather than being, kind of helter skelter at times with it. So he will definitely give you that. We know how good Christian Eriksson is. Me and you are big fans of him. I mean, we
Massive.
got teary eyed when this guy came back at Brentford. So
Absolutely.
we don't need to talk about him in terms of that and his qualities that he would bring and stuff like that. But in terms of Frankie De Jong, in terms of your pursuit of him and having to push it so hard and so hard and so hard, how do you feel about that? Like as if he's nearly, I wouldn't say being forced in the door, but you know what I mean. Do you think that's a good basis to begin with, or do you view it that way, or have you a different opinion on it?
No, I would view it fairly differently, and we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. I don't believe, that Ten Hag hasn't had a conversation with him. Now, I think De Jong is towing the party line. Barcelona have a payment to make by the end of June. And if the payment is missed, there's talk of Barcelona being relegated to the Segunda division in Spain, because they could receive a points deduction or just an automatic relegation because they owe out so much money. Now, apparently, the only way to remedy this is to sell, and he's one of their biggest assets, one of their most saleable assets, one of the assets that if they sold, they could look after this payment, and also they'd be able to get a couple more guys on the books at Barca, a couple of the free agents as well. It would free up money in the salary cap, so to speak.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that this is something that I think Frankie's aware of this. I think Frankie knows Barca need to get as much money in the door for him as possible. So he's not going to say, I want to transfer. I think he's got to say a certain amount because, for whatever reason, if investment came tomorrow and Frankie didn't leave Barca, he doesn't want to cover himself in dirt having to go back in there next season when the fans might look at like he pushed for a move, you know. I think he's very receptive to a move to Old Trafford. I believe, first of all, though, and I will lay this out, we are the only club in from. So it's not like the kid has options, so to speak, right now. Now, listen, maybe when it gets down to the bounds of it and, Barcelona are going to deal at 65, 68, 70 million, maybe then somebody else comes in and goes, do you know what? I might have a little bite of that for 68, 70 million. But as of now, we're the only club interested in him. I've been told this deal will 100% happen by the end of June because it has to from the Barcelona side. There's a little bit of poker face going on where Barca are saying, we want more, and United are saying, but we know you have to make this payment, so we're not budging. And they're going in with the second slightly improved offer. But I don't think this is going to get anywhere near, what the talk was earlier on, where people were talking about 100 million. This will be way lower than that, probably 25% lower. I'd be surprised if this reaches 75 million, including add-ons.
Yeah, you're probably thinking. Are you thinking somewhere around 70ish, maybe just a tad bit more, and probably would you say about 100 grand less than what he's on at the moment? Maybe 250 a week, 280 a week,
I'd
salary
say
wise.
I'd say salary wise is not a huge issue because if you look at what we've taken off the wage bill in recent weeks, I think
Yeah,
he could come in, and there's also a different tax structure in the UK, but I think he could come in somewhere around the 300 bracket. There's plenty of money for wages at United, and with what's gone out the door. Now obviously we don't want to necessarily go back into a situation where we start throwing massive money at guys who aren't, making that type of money. Do you know what I mean? Or guys that aren't worth that type of money. But I don't think salary will be an issue with Frankie De Jong or with Christian Eriksson if that can happen.
yeah. You don't see at the moment a situation where that transfer doesn't happen.
No.
Yeah, because I was thinking as well because I haven't heard much in terms of a backup plan either. I think he's the ace and you're going in for him and it has to happen and that's it.
Well, I
Yeah,
think the promising thing from a United point of view is he's Ten Hag's first choice, and from what I believe at the minute, he'll get it.
yeah,
And that's something that hasn't necessarily happened at United over the last number of years. Post I saw a tweet the other day. Ferguson wanted Benzema, he got Michael Owen. Um, VanGaal wanted somebody, he got somebody else.
Yeah,
And
Mourinho the
Mourinho
same. Yeah, they
wanted
had a whole
Maguire,
listing with all the
and
managers. Yeah, saying that. Yeah,
Mourinho wanted Maguire and got nothing.
yeah,
And so it's difficult. But to believe that these are two of the players that Erik ten Hag wants, and these are two of the guys that he's looking to get into our starting 11, this would be massive for us. Like, this would be
yeah,
huge. If you're looking at that from a midfield point of view, and I 100% agree with what you said, I think Liverpool are a different team. Liverpool are very, very direct. They're direct from the wings and they're direct through the middle and stuff like that. But if you look at a team like Manchester City, who would stretch the possession across the field, they're very, very patient. They, if nothing's showing up on one side, they'll bring the ball back through the middle and they'll bring it back across the opposite side. And I've seen in the Guardiola documentary, the Man City documentary, I've seen him do this with them,
yeah.
and where he gets the guys to check back out and bring it back across and probe and look for the space, look for the runner. That's the type of thing that if you've got two guys like this on your side, you can do, because you can maintain possession of the football a lot better than if you've got a Scott McTominay and a Fred in there. And that's not a slight on the lads. I'm big fans of the lads, as you know. I'm a massive Fred fan. And
Yeah.
I think there's probably still, space in the midfield for an engine like that. But I think we need to start taking control of football matches. And if you're going to get control of a football match, you do it in the midfield.
Yeah, I think it's very Carrick-like, isn't it? When you think about Carrick, who was often vilified for the way he controlled the ball and moved it side to side and stuff like that, but it's kind of very like that, isn't it? In terms of that kind of style, isn't it? In terms of possession.
That's the Carrick that wasn't lauded until he decided to hang up his boots, and all of a sudden everybody realised that guy's missing
Don't,
from the middle of the park now.
only when you didn't have
We're
him,
in
yeah,
trouble. Absolutely,
yeah,
yeah, 100%.
yeah. Yeah, because when you were speaking there, I was straight away thinking Michael Carrick out loud, kind of. Let's move on from both these boys then and talk about Urian Timber and one ex-manager, Louis Van Gaal, has been in his ear,
Yeah,
talking to the boy saying,
this is really great on my nerves, I have to tell you.
what's your feeling on this? Because some fans have come out and says this is kind of like, spite and stuff like that. And other fans have come out and says, well, they can kind of understand it a little bit, because now I know it's a different situation and they should view it as a different situation. They were talking about like guaranteed game time and would he get the time that he needed. And Van Gaal made the point that like Donny van de Beek, who was a big part of the Dutch side, went in there, dropped out of the Dutch side because obviously he wasn't getting the game time either that he should have or should have earned or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But the boy Timber, I mean, he should have been looking at that as an opportunity to come in and like create that game time to put a stamp down on his situation in the international scene, isn't it?
There's a couple of things here for me. So first of all, there's definitely the spite issue on Van Gaal's side. I definitely see it as spiteful. He's had his knives out for the club since the club, made the decision to relieve him of his duties, let's say. Best to look at your future endeavours. But I do believe...
Can you see his point of view on that though? In terms of, I mean, he won an FA Cup and all, didn't he? Can you see
Yeah,
the point where he's coming from if you were him?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I suppose seeing his point and bearing the grudge, I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily a guy who bears the grudge. I can see
Yeah.
his point. I think he's a valid point. And I think maybe he'd be better off trying to take the more moral high ground with this rather than, furthering this anymore, I think if it's not a World Cup year, Timber doesn't listen to him, because I think he believes he has enough time. Or, sorry, I think he believes he gets into the team. I think the issue is you're coming into a new league. We know the Premier League is the best league in the world. You're coming from the Dutch division, right? Which, okay, it's a good league, but it's not anywhere near the Premier League. And I think he understands that going in there, Ten Hag can't make wholesale changes to begin with. It's gonna have to be piece at a time, because he still needs to get results while he changes the puzzle. And if he didn't get in straight away, we've got a World Cup coming up in November, December, which we've never had before. If the World Cup was next summer, I think the kid would have came. Your issue is if he doesn't get into that team by Christmas, he's in trouble. Now, one thing I would say is if you look across Manchester at one Nathan Aki, he's not necessarily somebody who plays week to week in the Manchester City squad And he is, however, one of the first names on the Dutch squad. He plays on the left of a back three, one side of Van Dijk, pretty much every game. He plays he plays trapped in between Van Dijk and Daley Blind. So, when you hear VanGaal talking about it and saying, if you don't get game time, I can't guarantee it. Then you look across the road and you go, well, actually, Nathan Ackey's not playing games all the time.
Bit of double standard, you're thinking?
Bit of a double standard here.
standard.
So that's where that's kind of grabbed me a little bit with that,
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose with Ake as well, when he has gone into the Dutch side, he's been absolutely excellent as well. So
he
I
has,
suppose,
but
but that's not to say. But I mean, that's not saying that Timber hasn't either. I mean, Timber's played very well in there
and
as well. So
there's nothing to say that Timber can't play at United and still be, unbelievable. Look
Yeah.
at what we're doing at the minute with the likes of Queven Kelleher at Ireland. Any game he's played for Ireland, the kid's been superb. He doesn't play week to week at Liverpool, but he's still training with the top players in the world. He's still training with somebody in Allison. He's still readying himself to perform week to week. And I understand, obviously, you got to be match sharp and stuff like that. But I mean, don't tell me training, 5-6 days a week with these guys, you're not going to be absolutely at it when you're called upon.
Yeah, and in fairness, when he's come in, he's played really well as well in those cup fixtures and stuff like that and all. I mean, he scored the winning penalty. I mean, what more could you want, really, But having said that, when Bazunu was fit, Bazunu was the number one choice because he was playing regularly. So it does kind of hold a little bit of water. Let's talk about a quick one, Dean. No, before we move off Uri and Timber, I suppose we need to talk about the new link now that move seems dead in the water. This Lisandro Martinez seems to be another option instead of Timber. What do you make of this guy? He seems a really, really good footballer, but as a central defender or on the left of a central defence or whatever it is, like is he 5'8", 5'9"? I was reading today.
Yeah, he's not a guy who's going to come in and physically dominate the Premier League. He's way more of a ball playing centre half. I probably even describe him a little more as a defensive midfielder playing in a centre back role, as opposed to a genuine centre back. I don't think we'll go near this kid. I think Arsenal have been linked heavily with him. I personally don't see it. I don't think it's what we need, and I don't think Ten Hag is going to go from a guy like Timber who plays football a very, very specific sort of way, who comes out from the back like that, who's built a certain way, who's got that type of speed and stuff like that, because the kid is lightning quick, to a guy like Martinez on the opposite side. I don't personally think he'll move the head like that quickly. I think if he was going to maybe, refocus his views elsewhere, I personally think he'd look at the boy Pau Torres quicker than he'd look at Martinez. I think, because I think he's a little more suited to the rigors of the Premier League, let's say. For me.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Pau Torres, like, I mean, he's a solid, strong, big lad. Like, you know what I mean. He can put himself about and stuff like that. I mean, that's the minimum expectation from Unai Emery at Villarreal. You know what I mean, and that would sit in nicely with United and with Erik ten Hag in terms of work rate and in terms of application.
I think Torres and Varane could be outrageous together.
Yeah, and we've spoke about it before, and you've been linked with him on a number of windows as well. So it's probably one that needs to just happen at this stage, isn't it? When you think about it, if Timber's not going to be the one.
I'd be absolutely shocked when football kicks off in August, maybe in Spain, if he's still at Villarreal. I'll be shocked, I have to say. I just can't see it. I know, obviously, United, there's possible interest there. I know Spurs are looking at him, and Newcastle still have an eye on him. I just can't see Villarreal hanging on to him for much longer.
Yeah, I think most top teams, if it became common knowledge that he's available and at a certain price, would be alerted to him. I'd imagine there'd be a number of teams in there for him. If they're not, they should be, exactly. Let's round it out. Dean Henderson gets a move to Nottingham Forest, initially on loan with an option to buy 20 million or something like that. What's your feeling there, that goalkeeper situation? We know De Gea has been outrageous last season.
Yeah, it's a strange situation, if I'm honest, and only from, I know United, we struggle to get deals done and stuff like that, but I think a loan deal for a guy like Henderson it's not a great deal for United. Plus, if we look at the fee itself, the fee is really, really low, like 20 million. He's an England international and stuff like that. He's generally been in the England squad as long as he was playing first team football. So I don't think 20 million is a whole lot. If we look at what Ramsdale went for last year, and he wasn't a keeper that was, with one of the bigger teams, and he wasn't an international at that stage. He went for 30 plus, So I think it also shows the difficulty United have in getting rid of players because of those inflated wages.
Yeah. I did say I was going to focus on the top six, so we'll park United there for the moment, unless you have anything to add. I don't know if you picked up on anything else today in news-wise or something like that. I'm sure it'll be evolving every day anyway. You're
Yeah, I
literally
think,
linked with everyone with a heartbeat at times, so it's just the nature of the
yeah,
window.
and that's frustrating because obviously then, a lot of it is, a certain amount of it is bullshit. And you want to just see links that are credible that, there was links last week. We saw the tweet go out, United were interested in Timber, in Frankie de Jong, and in the boy Vitinha.
Yeah,
And less than 3 hours later, he had signed for PSG. And then
yeah.
Romano comes out and says United had absolutely no interest in that kid whatsoever.
Apparently they made no contact or nothing, he said. Yeah, absolutely.
So, that's frustrating, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about let's switch it up and talk about Man City. And it was a nice little segue you brought me in there because first of all I want to talk about this man. So you brought me in nicely to this man, Gavin Bazunu, after signing for Southampton. Now, both of us being, you being an ex-goalkeeper at a decent level, me being a kind of a goalkeeping coach and really interested in goalkeeping, I think it fascinates me at times when I talk to goalkeepers. They're a different breed. What do you make of this move out of Man City for him to Southampton? I think it's a really good move.
I think it's a great move for the kid. Really, really is. I think the only thing the two things he was lacking from an international point of view was he was lacking the fact that he wasn't playing in the Premier League, and he was lacking the fact that he wasn't playing week to week in the Premier League. That now should be a given. He was in the League One team of the season with Portsmouth. He was extremely good. He was obviously Irish Player of the Year as well last year. He was very, very good. And I think now he's going to get first team football at Southampton. We get to see him on a week to week basis. I think that's Ireland's future. Looking right back at you there now, I have to say.
Yeah, no, it's a great move for the lad and delighted for him and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And listen, the boys earned it as well. He's been absolutely brilliant.
He's come through. He's come through the ranks there as Shamrock Rovers and stuff like that. To all the way to Manchester City. City's gone loan. He's done well at Portsmouth. Played unbelievable for Ireland. Got his move. I think it's a really clever piece of business from Southampton as well. By the way, we talk about how good they are in the market, but I mean, if that rises to 15 million, 2 or 3 seasons time, what could he be worth?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
You
a
know,
great meal for him, and I think going down there with Ralph as well, I think that's going to be excellent for him as well. It's
and don't forget,
um,
he's been on loan at Pompey. So
mm,
Southampton are their local rivals. So he's going down to a part of the country that he knows and he's very, very comfortable in, by
yeah,
the sounds of as well.
yeah. Only for he's a city lad, it felt like you're going to your rival type of thing, isn't it? Like it's interesting, all
Almost,
right,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Let's bring up these two boys, but before we talk about them, I know we're fans of these boys without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Man City, it's staggering what they're doing at the moment in terms of players out and stuff like that. But Bernardo Silva, a guy who we're huge fans of, linked with a move to Barca. Again, I presume this will hinge on what you were talking about earlier, this payment and all this sort of financial structuring and all.
Yeah, and I don't know if Barcelona can genuinely afford Bernardo Silva. Like, if you look at what they're trying to do with the likes of Lewandowski, and you look at, obviously they've got the lads coming in from Chelsea, in Christensen and probably Alonso and possibly Aspilicueta, and then they've got Frank Kessie coming in as well.
Kessie,
Like,
yeah.
there's a lot coming in. I don't know if Barca are going to be able to afford the likes of a Bernardo Silva on an outlay plus on the wage bill that they have going on at the minute. Um, so I don't know. I can absolutely see why Xavi would want him in the team and why he might say this is the piece this is one of the pieces of the puzzle we would like. A guy in there like a Bernardo Silva creating for the likes of a Robert Lewandowski with a Frank Kessie in behind setting the tempo it's a nice little team there. But I don't know. I think it might be a bridge too far for Barca and their finances, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I'd say he'd love as well to have the experience of a Bernardo Silva in there with the likes of Gavi and Pedri and all that and all. Like, it'd be
And Ansu
the
Fati and stuff like that. Yeah, because
yeah, like it'd be
there's a lot of young talent at Barcelona.
yeah, absolutely. And if you can put him in there in that blender to bring that experience and calmness to those boys, that'd be an unbelievable recipe there for Xavi, wouldn't it?
And it might actually give Bernardo Silva an opportunity to win the Champions League as well, because we know he won't do it at City. Like,
I don't know what the moves they're making at the moment. You know what I mean? It's like Pep ain't messing about at the moment. Let's get on to talk about these two boys. I don't think outside of the Brighton fan base, there's two bigger fans of this guy Cucurella, is there? We speak
no,
about this
definitely
guy for
not.
the last 12 months with such affection.
Yeah, absolutely. The kid's been phenomenal this season. He was Brighton's Player of the Year. Outside of maybe two other left backs in the country, he's the best left back in the. You're looking at Robertson and possibly Chilwell on his day. When he's fit and stuff like that. Other than that, you're looking at this boy Cucurella. He is phenomenal. Really, really is. Great engine, technically gifted. Can pass. He's dogged in his defence as well. He's everything Pep would look for in a fullback, if I'm honest.
Mm,
And he's obviously come out of La Masia at Barcelona as well.
yeah, he's some player. Um, Calvin Phillips. This is kind of how do you feel about this one? This is kind of a weird one, isn't it? This is a guy I wouldn't have expected them to be linked with.
Well, if you pop him in with Cucurella and Haaland in the shit haircut club, he's definitely someone I could see going to City. But if you're looking at what's around in England in that defensive midfield position, you've either Declan Rice or Calvin Phillips. Now, Declan Rice is going to cost you close to 100 million. Calvin Phillips is probably going to cost you half of that. And is the gap between the two players big enough to warrant double the fee? I think that's where Pep would go. Don't need to spend 100 on Rice. 50 on him will do me because of what we have around him. If you were a weaker team, if you were a Man United, would you get away with a Calvin Phillips? Probably not. You'd probably need a Declan Rice. Whereas at a Man City, where you've got quality all over the field, where you've now got probably one of the most prolific goal scorers, coming into your team in a Haaland. I think this guy do unbelievable at City, I have to say. And to be honest with you, he's still only going to be their number two there, behind a Rodri. He's going to take the role that Fernandinho played, which was the bit part.
Well, that's my thinking as well. Is that going to work for him in terms of leading into a World Cup year? Um,
Yeah, I
Now I
think
know
so
I
because
know he's been injured and he's been out of the picture for a while and stuff like that. But would you
yeah,
think if he put in a solid 3 or 4 months at a club, not necessarily Leeds and maybe not necessarily Man United, let's say somewhere like an Arsenal or a Spurs, say, or a West Ham, if
mhm.
he put in a solid 3 months there, you would think he'd kind of play his way back into Southgate's thinking based on how well he played at the last tournament. No,
Well, I'd say he could sit on the bench for City till November, but provided he's fit, he plays with Declan Rice either way. He's nailed on.
okay, you think so? Yeah,
100%. Well, he
okay,
wants to play with two defensive midfielders, and the only two real defensive midfielders they have are Rice and him. And like you said, his performance at the last tournament, he was unbelievable. So I mean, for a lack of fitness at times, he hasn't necessarily had a lack of form. So I think he's nailed on to play in the England.
Do you think Southgate's thinking would change based on the Nations League performances, or does a leopard not change the spots?
No, he's not expansive enough to change things around. And I am a fan of Southgate, but I think he's got limitations. You know, he's extremely defensive. If you look at the England team, if you look at the England team on paper that went into that Euro final against Italy, that's England's game to lose. But England lost that game in the dressing room because they had a guy who was riddled with fear. They had a guy who was fearful of them being beaten rather than allowing them off the reins and letting them play some football because they
Express
had
themselves
the
and go out and win a game,
express.
yeah?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. They should have won. the Euros. And if they had won the Euros, I think you could be looking at them as a serious contender for the World Cup. I do still think they'll be in the shake-up in the World Cup, because I think when he gets all the boys out on the day, I think they've got an awful lot in their squad, England. I really, really do. Like, you think of the likes of some of the guys that aren't going to make the squad. That's when you're looking at guys going, geez, that guy didn't make the squad. That'll tell you how strong that England squad will be eventually, when everyone's playing, when everyone's fit, when everyone's ready to go in November. And I think they'll do well. I think they'll get to at least that semi-finals.
Yeah, they've at least the makings of 2-11s competitive, don't they? When you think about it, talent
Absolutely.
wise and stuff. So there's really
Absolutely.
no excuse for Southgate to be
The, the
successful.
only
It just depends on what success level, what that means at the moment for England.
the biggest issue England have at the minute is in that centre back role, and that's why he traditionally plays three at the back, because he's not already plays two and plays the two defensive midfielders to shield. If he had somebody that could go in and two or three centre backs that could go in and be very comfortable with, I think England could win this. Your problem is, if you look at what they have there, they've Ben White, they've Connor Cody, they've Harry Maguire, they've guys like that who are good players but not great players. And if you want to win a World Cup or a European Championship, you need great centre backs. Just
Yeah,
ask the team.
lads prone to a mistake on that stage. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I know where you're coming from. Yeah, if they had the likes of a Diaz, or they had the likes of a Van Dijk or something like that,
yeah.
they'd be nailed on, wouldn't they? But
If
then he'd
Virgil,
have to
if
adjust and
Virgil
he'd have
van
to
Dijk,
play. Yeah,
if Virgil van Dijk was English, they could actually not just play the World Cup and just give it to them. Fact.
interesting. Good shout. Gonna move on to my own team, Liverpool. You've seen I've expressed some frustration over the last few days, and I know you commented on it saying, "Look, you've made some really, really good signings. If we include Luis Diaz and Fabio Carvalho and all this kind of thing," and I understand and I get that. But I went back and I had a deep dive into last season, and I looked at the games where we lost, where we dropped points or we drew games that we shouldn't have, where we gave winning positions away and all that kind of thing. And at those games, and I was at the Brighton game myself when we were 2-0 up and we surrendered it against Brighton, and our midfield that day was absolutely shocking. And that's my concern. My concern is it's kind of come out now that the talk at the moment is that the window is more or less closed for Liverpool. Calvin Ramsey is the last bit of business that they're going to do, unless it's mainly outgoings.
Mm-hmm.
But my concern is still that midfield. I mean, how do you feel? I mean, you're a neutral, so you don't have a card in this game. Whereas
Yeah.
I'd be more sort of closer and more sort of in the midst of it. How do you feel about it as a neutral in terms of that midfield, going into what Man City has done, going
Mm.
into what you've seen this season where we fell slightly short in the Champions League and in the Premier League?
I
How do
think
you feel about it?
I think it's the one part of the squad that you would say doesn't stack up against the rest. If you look at now, obviously you've got two left backs in a Robertson and a Simicas. You've probably got two right backs now in a Trent and a Ramsey. You've got two or three keepers. You've got four centre backs. Konate and Gomez counted with Matip and Van Dijk. You've got the attackers and the Diaz and the Salas and the Jotas, and there's a lot. There really is a lot. I think you've got the boy Carvalho, you've got Curtis Jones, and you've got Harvey Elliott, who are going to be serious footballers, but maybe aren't right at it at the minute. And then you're looking at midfield position. You've got Fabinho, who for me is a terrific footballer. You've got Thiago, who did very, very well from Christmas onwards. I'm not so sure of how robust he is in that Premier League. He seems to pick up a lot of knocks, not of injuries. And that's when, I'd start worrying as a Liverpool fan, because I think, if you look at the other three boys, the Keita, Milner and Henderson, I'm not convinced by any of them at all. I think, Milner, we all know about Milner. He's a great pro, has been for a number of years. I just think, time catches up with you. And unfortunately, I just think it's caught up with James Milner. I think Henderson's always had his limitations for me. I think he's all action. I think he puts a great shift in. But I think from a quality point of view, he lacks an awful lot. And I have to be honest, and I know I've said it before, and I've taken a bit of slack from the Liverpool fans for this. I see absolutely nothing in the boy Keita. Absolutely nothing. He's miles off it. And I know we've had this conversation, and you've talked about at times he does this and he does. I see nothing that he brings to the Liverpool team, I have to say, especially when you look at him in an isolated situation. Because if you look at everyone else on that pitch, I can make a case. I could make a case to have James Milner in ahead of him, and that's pushing the boat. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, see, that's my frustration when I talk about the midfield, and the way I look at it is twofold. The talk now is that we're going to do some sort of a pre-contract kind of thing with Jude Bellingham. That's the talk. But it'll be for next summer because, as you've pointed out, they don't sell two big players in one window. So Haaland is gone. So Bellingham wouldn't be going anywhere till next summer.
Yeah.
So we may get some sort of a pre-contract thing done there. But what's your feeling on that, like next summer? Because my problem is, if we go through this season and we find our midfield is exposed, and look, Thiago's going to get injured, Kate is going to, out of 5 games in a month, Kate is going to give you 3 5 out of 10s. There's no doubt about it. We know that. We know that Milner can only come in potentially as a squad player. We know that Jordan is a year on and he can only offer us somewhat. We know that Curtis gives us something different, but Klopp is not always convinced by him. We know that Harvey's still a young lad. We know that Fabio Carvalho's going to come in. He's only young and stuff like that. Fabulous talent, but we don't know yet what way that's going to work. What's your feeling on that, pushing it down another year and not strengthening that midfield for now? Because obviously you're looking at a lot of players here at the moment, probably 7 players that are in their prime, who are going to be a year older than next year. Then we're staring into next summer as well. And the other problem I have with next summer as well is you're going to have Firmino out of contract, probably going on a free. You're going to have Salah out of contract, probably going on a free. So there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done there as well. And I think there's one other as well, out of contract going on a free as well. I can't remember which
I
one it is.
I think, and I know there's not a lot of Liverpool fans feel like this. I think the boy Carvalho is going to see an awful lot of daylight this year, a lot more than Liverpool fans will think. I imagine you're going to have your Fabinho as your defensive midfielder, sitting and screening in the back four. I think you'll have Thiago in there trying to set the tempo. And I think that link between the middle of the park and the front three of Diaz, Nunez, and Salah will be the boy Carvalho. I think you could see a lot of him this season, and probably a lot more than Liverpool fans expect to see. But I think coming from a league where he's played at Fulham, he's played in that championship, he played nearly 40 games this season for Fulham.
Yeah.
You know,
I know where you're coming from. He's not a kid. He's
no,
robust
he's
enough to
not.
play in it. He's not a kid.
Absolutely.
He's a kid in
And
age, but he's not a kid in.
and the
Yeah.
standard, if we think about the standard, how bad the standard of refereeing is in that Premier League, the standard of refereeing in the Championship is dreadful. So this kid has probably been hurdling challenges for 40 games this season, and he's back up and he's at it. He's back up and he's at it. This is the kind of thing I like about the likes of a Jared Bowen, who's come up through the Championship, let's say, where they really, they know what they get battle hardened, so to speak, and they're very, very robust like that. I think
They know the difference between a knock and an injury.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
And they know when they see hatchet men as well that we just stay quick, we just get away from it, and we're clever. They're not going to go out and mix it with guys like that, and you tend to have less of them in the Premier League because with VAR and the likes of that, guys will just be getting sent off left, right, and centre. But I absolutely think you'll see quite a lot of that lad, I have to be honest. But I would listen. I think if you're talking about Jude Bellingham is out the door as a footballer. Like there's nothing this kid can't do. He's unbelievable. He's got a great engine. He can pass. He's got good touch. His balance is excellent. His vision is superb. He can score goals. He has absolutely everything. He really, really does. Like from a Liverpool point of view, what do you do in the meantime? If that's the jewel in the crown that you're looking for, and if that's how you build, do you go out and drop 20 or 30 million on a gap filler?
Well, you see, I'm coming from the point where it might not necessarily be a gap filler if you bring someone in. Like I'm thinking, let's say Yves Bissouma, who's gone to Spurs, 25 million. We were chasing him last summer. Now we did not end up signing anyone, and we wanted him when he was 50, 60 million. And I was thinking, when you move into next year as well, Are we going to have to make a decision over Hendo? Are we going to have to make a decision over Milner then? It's another year on. You know what I mean? Is Klopp going to give up on Project Keita at that stage? So literally then our midfield is Fabinho and Thiago. And Thiago's going to be a year older as well. Fabinho, we know, is an unbelievable player.
I,
So what's the problem in bringing in an Yves Bissouma for 25 million? What's the problem in bringing in a Christian Eriksson on a free with a sign on? You know what I mean? I'm just looking at these things that's happening
I,
around me and I'm going,
I
why
get
don't we
that
think
from
of those things?
well, I get that from a fan's point of view. But I mean, ultimately, if Klopp picks the team, Klopp knows what he wants, and maybe a Christian Eriksen doesn't fit in to the way he wants to play, and that's not a slight on Christian Eriksen, but you know, if the piece of the puzzle you want, there's only one piece that fits into the puzzle, and it's not necessarily, all pieces can be rammed in there. Klopp might look at that and think, you know what, that's not what we want. That's not what I want from my midfield. I know I have a midfielder who does A. I know I
Mm,
have a midfielder who does B and C.
yeah.
And yeah, listen, if you give me a toss up and I get an Naby Keita or a Christian Eriksen, who do I pick? I pick Christian Eriksen all day long and twice on a
Mm,
Sunday. However, they're two very, very different players. Christian Eriksen is a guy who looks to probe an awful lot more than a Naby Keita. With true balls, he's got an awful lot more guile. Whereas somebody like a Naby Keita has an awful lot more energy than a Christian Eriksen, and he tries to be a lot more involved in the game, albeit he
but
hasn't managed to do it on the level that Liverpool expected.
yeah, but see, but outside, if you think about it, outside of Thiago, in terms of creativity and stuff like that, I mean, it's just if you think about it, the games where we dropped those key points are the games when Thiago was out mainly. So when he's in there, I think I looked at a stat the other day. When he's played in the team has performed practically every time, say, you know. And I was
Yeah,
just, my fear is that he goes in there. Look, he's going to get an injury. He's going to pick up something. And then I'm staring down the barrel of a midfield. And remember, Keita can get injured as well. He's had. Then you're staring down the barrel of a midfield that's potentially Milner, Hendo, and maybe Ox or Curtis. You know, we played Spurs with Tyler Morton in our midfield.
yeah, and I
Like
mean,
it's
there's another kid who's also going to be a year older. Don't forget, and he did well against Spurs. He wasn't. Listen, it was difficult for him, but the boy will have learned from it, and he played well in a couple of the cup games as well. And I think again, maybe Klopp believes buying somebody harmed the development of some of those young lads. And now he feels like, knowing that there's a Bellingham in 12 months' time, that I don't harm these boys any further, that I make sure that they fill those 40 games between 2 or 3 or 4 of them, and they get 10 or
yeah,
12 games each. And you know, unless somebody
yeah,
comes in and absolutely takes it by the horns and goes, this is mine, nobody else is getting it. And if that
yeah.
happens, it'll absolutely be the boy Carvalho.
Yeah, my concern is just as I said to you, when you think about those seven players, the likes of Van Dijk, Fabinho, you know, Robinson, Trent, all these guys that are kind of in their prime, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're really good. I'm not saying they're older or younger,
No, no, no,
but
no.
just but just to just to not one of the guys who Sam who I follow on Twitter and stuff like that, he does a brilliant This Is Football is his podcast. He's out there, he's absolutely brilliant. And he made a point last night on one of the shows. He was saying it's like as if every summer we get the recipe for a cake and we want to make a chocolate cake. And every year we don't have the chocolate or we don't have the flour or we don't have the water, or we just miss that one ingredient that if we could bring in a player. I mean, there was talk today, I heard, that they were looking at a situation with Inter Milan. I know it's not going to happen. It's absolute pie in the sky. And these are the kind of things that come out when reports come out saying that we're finished in the transfer window. This all kind of speculation starts coming out that Keita plus cash for Nicolo Barella at Inter Milan, which I know was not going to happen, but that was the talk today. And the other talk was the man on the screen there, Genie, as well, potentially was being offered to us on a season-long loan, which I
And
don't think is an option.
well, again, Fabrizio Romano seemed to think that the reports were completely false, that there was no
Yeah,
contact and there was nothing been. So again, this is more, guys get themselves a little bit of a name for Twitter and this and that, and then they just start to
yeah,
spin a little more of a
yeah,
yarn. Like, who could I genuinely see Liverpool in for in the midfield? If they were to go in, I think they need someone like that, someone a little more robust and somebody a little more almost box to boxy. A guy that can bring a bit of energy to that midfield, to a Fabinho and a Thiago, because why, they've got plenty of guile. Technically, they're two gifted boys. I don't necessarily see them as two engines, if you know what I mean. And I think
Yeah,
that's where you'd want to see somebody that was a little more, somebody in the mold of a Henderson, but just with a
yeah,
little more quality,
yeah.
and
We
I
did
don't
see with Fabinho this year. He was moving more forward at times, um, but his position is not that position that you probably want doing that anyway.
know, because
It's
he's got to be covering in that right back slot that Trent is left vacated most of
absolutely,
the time.
yeah, absolutely. Let's move on anyway from Liverpool because at times it just frustrates me. Let's talk to let's move on to Chelsea and talk about Chelsea. Should be an interesting one. I've done a couple of podcasts with Ian on the Chelsea Roar talking about this. But let's start. They seem to be heavy on signing Raheem Sterling, don't they? It looks like Jesus is probably going to go to Arsenal, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But they look as if they want to buy Raheem Sterling, don't they?
Yeah, listen, I think it's a great move. If I'm honest,
Yeah,
really, really do. I think he probably wants a little more game time than he's getting at Manchester City. Obviously, Pep likes to rotate a little bit. I think he wants to play game after game after game. I think he wants to make sure he gets that World Cup spot nailed down. And I think if he comes in and plays games at Chelsea, we know what his numbers are like. Other than not being able to get the ball past David De Gea, his numbers are
yeah.
very, very impressive.
He's a
Um,
player who relies on rhythm, doesn't he? As you say, game after game, he needs to be involved, doesn't
Absolutely,
he? Yeah,
absolutely. And I have to say, I think Sterling's a great player. I think he was an unbelievable player at Liverpool. I think he got even better at Manchester City, and I think he can
yeah,
bring all of that to Chelsea. But that, I just think that him coming in at Chelsea, it's bad news for a couple of players, and our boy Lukaku isn't the only one that's gonna harm. Because I think if Sterling comes in, I think that's the end of Timo Werner as well for my money. They both come in from that left hand side. I don't think Werner's good enough to play through the middle of Chelsea. And when he's played, he's tended to come in from that left hand side, and I don't think he'll get near it with Sterling. So I'd expect if Lukaku goes, which by the way, that's a shocking deal for Chelsea, if I might add. That's a dreadful deal for Chelsea to have paid that much money and to be hoping to get 10 million out of a loan fee. I think it's a really poor piece of business.
Well,
Um,
I think the talk is they've only ponied up something like 15 or 17 million so far.
yeah, but
That's
the
the
transfer
talk.
fee is still out in the background.
Yeah, but I think where Ian was coming from the other night, he was saying that Chelsea are trying to build some sort of a case at the moment to unravel that and untangle that. Now I don't know the detail of it or anything like that. I'm not too sure, but that's the talk at the moment.
I don't think there's much unraveling on a transfer fee. I mean, it's written into, it's a contract. It's a legally binding contract.
Mm,
No matter what his performance was like, no matter what his attitude was, no matter what he came out and said about the club, you're not got now paying that transfer fee. Now, if Inter want him back, maybe Inter buy out the rest of the contract of what Chelsea owed him. If they've paid 17 or 18, if there's 10 that goes down as the loan fee, and all of a sudden you're nearly at 30 million, and then Inter say, there's the 60 million that's owed, we'll
mm,
pay you, you pay us, job done type thing. I don't
yeah,
know. And then you
I
stuck
don't see that money being there unless they have more sales, unless they sell
Inter,
more
not
players.
well, certainly not this year, because if you look at the business they've done, like they've
Mm,
taken in Andre Onana from Ajax on a free, they've
mm,
taken in Henrik Mkhitaryan from Roma on a free, they've got a deal in place almost for Paulo Dybala, they're looking at a deal for Romelu Lukaku, and then they're also more than likely going to sell the boy Milan Skriniar, and he'll be replaced by the Brazilian lad Bremer, who comes from Torino.
yeah, the talk was that Skriniar deal might be involved in something to do with Loftus Cheek, but I don't see that happening either. I'd be surprised. I think they'll want cash on that basically.
Well, the Skriniar deal is PSG. It's not Chelsea.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they've moved that way now. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
forgot about that.
yeah,
Yeah. What else? Let's look at Chelsea. I mean, do you see with the moves that Barcelona are making, and if they make that payment, what do you make of Dembele? Is that still a potential target for Chelsea? Do you think it could still happen?
yeah. Absolutely. I think it's if Thomas Tuchel wants it, I think there's an appetite there from Tuchel, and I think he'll try maybe to go back in for Dembele. I mean, you're looking at starting the season with Dembele and Sterling as your right and left sided attackers, but you're still very much short of striker.
Mm,
Unless he wants to give Timo Werner a spin or he wants to just play Havertz as a false nine because he's done a great job for them up there, but he's certainly not a number nine. I
mm.
think he'd do way better playing a little bit deeper and picking up the ball and driving at players.
Yeah, his arrival late into situations is what has created most success for him. Really, when you see the way he plays, so coming
Yeah,
from that sort
absolutely.
of position, absolutely. Um,
He's a 10. He's not a nine. He can
yeah,
play the nine position, and he can he'd be. I think I'd love to actually see him in a Manchester City team where they play with the false nine because I
mm,
think there's a lot more around that City down the flanks and stuff like that he could be amazing. Just arriving late like that Gundogan sort of thing, 10 yards out, one touch finish, boom, boom. I think he'd do amazing. But I don't think Chelsea have the firepower on the wings. Now listen, they're going to get Raheem Sterling and they're going to get an Ousmane Dembele. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. Maybe they're trying to load the wings up that when they get those balls in to that false nine position, that Havertz is in there and he can take those finishes.
yeah, that'd be very impressive. What have you made of the whole Kunde situation and the lit? Kunde seems to be getting his head turned towards Barcelona. And that apparently that the deal going to Chelsea may now not happen, and Chelsea are now having a look at I think it's Mateus, isn't it? Mateus the lid, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Matthias de Ligt at Juve.
Mm,
He cost an awful lot of money to get out of there. And that's the one thing I would say, probably more than it cost to get Kunde out of Sevilla. I don't necessarily see Barcelona again being able to afford the likes of Jules Kunde, especially when you consider they're looking at a Cesar Azpilicueta, Christensen, and a Marcus Alonso. Like, where they get the money from? They're thoughtless. They've got this payment to make by the end of June, and that's probably the Frankie de Jong money. They're going to struggle to get a deal in place for Robin Lewandowski, plus the Frank Kessie move and others like
they'll have
Barca.
they'll have all that good Spotify money, won't they?
Barca are dreaming, man. They're absolutely dreaming.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What do you make? Obviously, Bruce Buck left. Came out that Bruce Buck has left his position at Chelsea,
Yeah,
and
20 years.
yeah, and Marina's next. Apparently, it sounds like that's going to be done at least by the end of the week. And it looks like that the man in picture there, Todd Bowley, looks like he wants to take control of that situation between himself and Tuchel. What's your feeling on that? I mean, he wouldn't
It's
have the
it's
experience that are there. Is it a bit early to be pulling that trigger?
it's an extremely dangerous game to be playing. You just look at how badly wrong it can go at a Manchester United when you put a guy like Ed Woodward into a position where he's not really qualified for.
Mm,
That's kind of what Todd Bowley is doing at the minute. I think if you look at the way things were set up there, obviously you got Bruce Bucks there, 20 years at Chelsea, so not a lot of good at the club. And our friend Marina, she's a diamond, but she's been shown the door as well. I don't think I would have moved both of them on as quickly. I think maybe I would have kept one at least till the end of this window, or maybe until next year. Um, because there's an awful lot of work to do with that Chelsea squad. That's not
mm,
anywhere near where Tuchel wants it to be. I'd imagine Chelsea are probably looking at somewhere between 4 and 6 players to come in, and to leave that all down to a guy like Todd Bowley, who is obviously a phenomenal businessman that he's put himself in this sort of a situation, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be in the right position to go and broker deals with clubs who are
mm.
probably looking at him going, hold on a minute here, who's this guy? You know,
Do you think these moves are as much Tuchel as it is Bowley? Do you think Tuchel is looking to get that kind of power there as well?
um, I don't know. Listen, it's a possibility. It's Tuchel, all right, but I think like, listen, if Tuchel wants players and Marina and Bruce Buck haven't been going the same direction that he wants, that's obviously a
Yeah,
move he might have made. But I think it's a bold move if that's the case. And it's a
yeah,
bold move on Todd Bowley's behalf, because there's no saying Tuchel is the man, you know, to win things at Chelsea, to bring them to where they want to go. And then if all of a sudden Tuchel's back out the door and somebody else is in, who's coming in now to make the decisions? Who's going to be, who's going to do Marina and Buck's jobs now? Is Todd Bowley going to do
mm.
them as well as do everything else in the background?
I think they're talking. Aren't they talking of bringing in the guy who's at Atletico? That's the last I heard. Can't remember his name now. But he's at
Yeah,
Atletico Madrid.
again, there's talk, but I'm
Yeah,
not. Listen, it's a big restructure, like at United. It is a
yeah,
big restructure, and I think if you've got the continuity of having a manager that's been there for a while, I think, I don't know whether I would have gone for the whole restructure straight away. Whereas I think the restructure at United is easier because you've got a new manager in as well. So to change the whole scenario
mm,
around them is much easier, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah, I
But
was thinking with the Marina decision, maybe keep her there till the end of this window at least. And let's get this window in there and get yourself in there so you get some sort of an understanding at how all this thing works. You know what I mean? Because I mean, obviously
and
Bowley would. I mean, he's obviously a fantastic businessman. You don't get to that level by not being, and obviously he understands finances and structure and stuff like that. But I don't know whether signing personnel for the LA Dodgers and for a baseball team is gains any sort of parallel to what you have to do in this football world where
absolutely,
it's unbelievable, but yeah, we'll keep an eye on it. It's amazing, actually, the parallels, isn't it, between United and Chelsea at the moment, isn't it, in terms of internal restructuring, volume of players needed, rebuild, all this kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's really
I
interesting, the
think the
dynamic.
only thing that Chelsea have on United at the minute is the fact that they've a manager that has been there and done it a little
Mm,
more regularly than Eriksson Hag has. Other than that, like, if I look at the Chelsea squad and I look at the United squad, I absolutely believe the United squad is up there with the Chelsea squad. I have to be honest.
mm.
Um, like, I don't look at the Chelsea squad and think, wow.
Yeah,
Now, and I know Chelsea fans might think differently. Here's the question: if we just look at those wide positions, you've got a Christian Pulisic, you've got a Hakim Ziyech, you've lads like that. Would I trade either of them for a Marcus Rashford and a Jadon Sancho? I don't think I would.
mm,
You know, would I trade um, uh, a Havertz for Ronaldo? Don't think I would.
mm,
Yeah, I'd probably trade a little more. If I certainly wouldn't trade a Mendy for David De Gea. Not a chance.
mm.
I wouldn't trade. Would I trade a 30-year-old Varane for a 36-year-old Thiago Silva?
I suppose where they have you is you would take Ben Chilwell and you would take Reece James.
Absolutely.
So that's
In
that's
in a
kind of where
heartbeat.
so that's where we're coming from. It's probably root and branch between both squads, really.
Yeah, but
The
also the one thing I will say about that, and especially at United, you know, with Luke Shaw, if somebody can get Luke Shaw performing again, we know he's the best left back in the country when he's playing. When he's playing, how he can perform.
mm,
Now, we've seen it one season at United so far where he had an unbelievable season and he was
yeah,
absolutely top drawer. But it's in the kid, he can do it, and when he does do it, nobody gets near him.
yeah.
So
It's so difficult, isn't it, to judge some of those players there at the moment
very
because
much
they've
so.
all been so poor and they've all performed so poor, with the
Yeah,
exception of De Gea and Ronaldo. Everyone else has been shocking. So
yeah,
it's and it's so difficult. Then, like as you said, you've seen the best of these guys and you've seen the worst of these guys, but you know the best is in there. So with the right setup, the right coaching, and the
yeah,
right support, there's no reason why that can't come back out. So
yeah,
yeah, no, I get
100%.
you fully. Yeah, let's move on then. Let's have a quick chat about Arsenal. Um, Surely this is going to happen, isn't it? I know other people are sniffing around this guy. I know Tottenham have expressed an interest in him, and I know that Chelsea have expressed an interest in him as well. But I heard reports coming in from Brazil the other day that apparently this is basically done and dusted. And there's been soundings from Edu as well and from Arteta that this is just crossing the I's and crossing the T's and dotting the I's. What you thinking on Jesus?
I think he's going to be a great signing for somebody.
Is that the jersey you see him wearing?
I think they've put the most effort in so far. I think he's further down the pecking order for a lot of teams. If I look at maybe Spurs, the deal for Steven Bergwijn to head back to Ajax is almost in place, which definitely frees up a spot in that upper end of the pitch for Spurs. And I mean, I think this guy would be great in an Antonio Conte team because I think he's a workhorse. I think Conte loves a good workhorse, you know. I think he wants workhorses everywhere in the team. My fear for Arsenal is if they don't get this over the line, they're in trouble because they really have put all their eggs in one basket. In one sense, it can mean, you know, you get the biggest egg, but in another sense, if they don't get him in,
it's egg on your face.
It's egg on your face, and you know, I think it could be, you know, he could be an amazing signing for Arsenal. I really, really think he could, because I think he'll play through the middle. I think he's exactly what they need because I think in the likes of a Lacazette and a Emerick Aubameyang, you had talented players who didn't want to work. I think this kid doesn't have maybe as much talent as the two boys, but he'll double the work rate, and I think that'll fit into an Arsenal side with the likes of Martinelli, with a Saka, with an Odegaard, you know, with a Smith Rowe. I think he's ideal. Have to be honest.
Fair enough. We also know we mentioned earlier that they're looking also Lissandro Martinez. So it'll be interesting to see.
They've already done the boy Vieira from Porto.
It's just about to bring him up. What did you think of that move there?
Yeah, it's a good move, you know, and I know that they're still heavily linked with Yuri Tillemans. Now, if you're going in with Yuri Tillemans and the boy Vieira, and you've got him through the middle of an Odegaard, Saka, and a Martinelli or a Smith Rowe, that's massive.
Yeah, the latest news out there I was going to say to you is they've cooled on Yuri Tillemans, and the talk now is for Yuri Tillemans is he may end up signing a 1-year extension at Leicester. That's the talk at the moment. That's going around. I'd be surprised if that happens, but that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I heard it the other day, but I've also heard that it's not as close to happening as, you know, because I don't believe he's happy to sign a deal. I think he's angling for the move. I think Tillemans could be one that goes down very late in the game, because I think there's a lot of teams looking to see what they can do, and I think Tillemans. I think they know what it'll take to get Tillemans out of Leicester because he's obviously only got the year left on the contract. They know, you know, the option isn't. It's an option. It's not a guarantee. So I think there's a lot of clubs that maybe have just one eye on Tillemans coming towards the end of the window, going, do you know what? Time for us to pounce here.
He's another guy Liverpool should be looking at. We were linked with him last year as well. It just frustrates me when I talk about these guys. Let's move on. Eddie signed his deal. Eddie and Nketiah signed his deal long term. I think it's a 5-year deal, 100 grand a week. The talk was something like a 5 mil signing on or something like that. I don't know how true that is. That's what was being put out there. I'm sure you've seen the video the other day of him walking into the boardroom, I think it was, and they unveiled the number 14 shirt for him. Arsenal fans were going perplexed at this lad. They were saying something like, what did he score last year? Something like 5 or 6 league goals, and this guy's getting 30 on Henry's jersey.
Listen,
what you thinking on this?
They tried for so long to get the kid to sign the deal, and he looked like he was going anywhere but Arsenal. And of course, then Aubameyang leaves in January, and they've nothing other than Nketiah. In fairness to the kid, he stood up, he scored a few goals for them, you know, got some vital wins and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, you know, he ends up getting the deal that he was after in the beginning. I don't think he's going to be first choice on the team sheet, you know, week to week. I think if they play a two, they'll play Nketiah and Jesus, which would be very, very lively. But I don't necessarily see them playing the two very often. I think Nketiah will end up being the guy that plays in the lesser games, in the cup games, or the guy that comes off the bench to try and nick one near the end, you know?
Yeah. Were you surprised he re-signed? I know there wasn't a huge amount of clubs in for him now either. I know there was talk of Crystal Palace.
I think there was
Um,
enough in there to, he could have taken the drop down and played in the championship and built himself from there like the boy Dominic Solanke has done, So, but I was a little bit surprised he signed after when you turn around and you say you're not signing, and then you sign, it kind of makes you look a little bit weak. But in fairness, the kid's come out with 100 grand a week, and he's taking Thierry Henry's jersey, so you know.
Yeah, the Arsenal fans are just. It's weird from the Arsenal fans, isn't it? Because a lot of them didn't even want him to resign, and then when the jersey thing came out, they just blew a gasket totally. Like it's mad. What's your feeling on jersey and jersey numbers and all, just in general? Just to get, do you care about it? Is it something that should be revered? Is it something that does it really matter?
Does it really matter? It doesn't really matter at all, does it?
Yeah.
If you're
Mm,
if you're good enough, go and make any number at any team the number. You know,
yeah.
like
Because I'm
somebody
kind of,
can.
I'm kind of thinking like if you're thinking about the history of a really good side, let's say a great Bayern Munich side or that great Barcelona side or that great Real Madrid side. Sure,
Yeah,
if you were to worry about numbers and all, you'd be running out of numbers to put on jerseys because you'd be retiring them all.
well,
You
absolutely,
know what I
because
mean? So
isn't that what happens in the States? Don't they retire so many jerseys and they hang them up around the stadiums that
yeah,
guys are left wearing these oddball numbers for years.
yeah,
Listen, I understand guys have numbers they want to wear. You've traditional 1 to 11s. You've obviously got 23 because of Michael Jordan. So many players wanted to wear 23. Beckham obviously
mm,
moved on to that, and it went from there. Um, like, does it matter? I don't think it matters a whole lot, if I'm honest. Again, if
mm.
you're good enough, you can wear it on your back and prove that number to be. You can make that number famous as opposed to the number making you famous.
Yeah, I suppose if he went out this season and he banged in 15 or 20 goals, would they still care?
They wouldn't
Um,
give a fiddlers. That's Arsenal fans all over, let's be honest. Right, Morris?
and your good friend Del Boy.
And me good boy, me good friend Del Boy Gunner.
Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely. Yeah, he came on. He came on to do a show with me there. He thought you were coming on. He was looking forward to it and stuff like that. So we'll get you together again, no
We
doubt
we
about it.
shall meet again, Derek. Don't worry.
Absolutely. Let's finish up with Tottenham. Obviously, we mentioned Dave Basuma already on the show. 25 million plus add-ons. Great bit of business for Tottenham. Tottenham
Yeah,
are making serious moves in the market, aren't they?
absolutely.
I, I, I suppose looking at it, I said, apart from the Nunes stuff at Liverpool and stuff like that, and the signings they made, and apart from the likes of Haaland and Alvarez and the moves that Man City made, like Tottenham are up there, aren't they? They're up there with what they're doing. Perisic coming in on a free, Fraser Forrester's after coming in. They're interested heavily in Eriksson. I think there's talk of they're looking at Jesus, the boy Spence, who's a really really good baller.
The
And
boy Spence should absolutely be on United's radar, 110%. The only issue I would say is he's generally played in a back five and he's played as the wing back. We're probably going to play a back four and a flat back four, and that's possibly why he won't look at Spence. But Bayern Munich were heavily linked with Spence in January. Now, when teams like Bayern Munich are looking at a guy, they're looking for a reason. The kid Spence is going to be an absolute baller. They've got Fraser Foster, who's now back up, obviously, to Hugo Lloris because the boy Galena has gone back to Italy. Um, Perisic is going to play in that wing back position,
mm,
probably on the left hand side. You've got Kulishevsky and Bentancur who came in January and have done great jobs. You've now got Yves Basuma who's kind of come into that midfield and really add some robustness and some solidity in there. We know he's got a
mm.
great engine. He's box to box. Another couple of additions, and Spurs are going to be right up there with Antonio Conte in the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah,
if there was ever, are you shocked at him? Are you shocked at the? I suppose, are you shocked at how liberal Daniel Levy's been with the wallet, or does it
well,
make sense because he knows that Conte will just hit the bricks if it like he'll just walk.
yeah. Well, there's it's twofold. Number one, he hasn't been that liberal because they got Foster on a free and they got Perisic on a free. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, the boy Basuma they've got for a song because obviously what's going on in the background, but they're happy enough and they're comfortable to deal at that level.
mm,
Um, they got Bentancur and Kulishevsky in on those loan deals as well, and he knows this is the opportunity to put Tottenham in the upper echelons of English football and European football, which will not happen with another manager because there's too many gambles out there. Conte hits the bricks this summer unless he gives him 6 or 7. and that's what he'll do, and rightly so, by the way.
It's going to be interesting. They're going to be very competitive this season, aren't they, Spurs? It's going to be a
Could be
lot of attacking options there.
Spurs could be in the mix for a top 3 spot this year.
Yeah,
But I mean,
I'm thinking.
you're talking about Conte from the start of the season, not from
Yeah,
15 games in.
absolutely. Yeah, and you're talking about them in most games they played in, bar that slight dip they had. They've been very competitive in most games they've been in and
Very
stuff like that as
competitive.
well.
They were
Yeah,
toys and uns, knickers at the back, and you've obviously got opportunities when you've got a Son and a Kulishevsky and a Harry Kane going on up front and stuff like that. And then you're bringing energy into that midfield. You're bringing a Perisic and a Jed Spence probably from the wings, which is better than what you had there in an Emerson Royale and a Sergio Reguilon.
yeah, absolutely. And then as you said, you're taking out Winks, and you're probably, I suppose, with Basuma going in as well, you're probably taking out Hallberg as well. So your
Well,
options on the
you've all
bench
of
are
a sudden got
improving
options.
slightly as well. Yeah,
Absolutely, you can go
absolutely.
to you can go 3 in midfield and play 4-3-3. Play Hallberg, play Bentancur, and play Basuma, and then play Kulishevsky, Kane, and Son, and a flat back 4 if you're at home, where you've got a lot of possession and where you're looking to maybe probe a little more, rather than playing 3 at the back and having the 2 wing backs.
Yeah, Spurs in a 4-3-3 would be very interesting, wouldn't it? Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Yeah, and they're also he hasn't given up on Bastoni yet as well, but it seems like every Inter Milan player is for sale at the moment by the looks of things. I don't know how many they can sell. Listen, pleasure having you on again. Great transfer show there where we looked at the top 6. As I said, later on in the week we're going to look at everyone else and see what kind of business they're doing or who they're linked with. We'll put together something on that. Just a little bit of housekeeping this week as well. We've got 2 very interesting combined 11 shows coming out over the next day or two. One is where we take it. They're both worst Premier League players. One is based on a combined 11 worst Premier League players, which is going to be very interesting. Myself and Mark put together. And we also did a combined 11 as well, where I looked at the worst Liverpool side and he looked at the worst Man United side. So they'll both be coming out this week. We're also going to be dropping as well. We're going to do a Premier League predictor table where I've given the boys a spreadsheet to put together. They're going to predict the results, and we're going to see potentially what the top 6 is going to look like point wise. Now, this is no disrespect to everyone outside of the top 6, because we know the likes of a Villa or a Newcastle or a Leicester or whatever can be up and around that after 10 games, of course. But what we said was we just look at it from the top 6 point of view. But it should be really, really interesting, and that we're finishing on Spurs in the first 10 games for Man City. Spurs is potentially my only hope of them dropping any points based on what they're doing at the moment. So that's a little flavour for what's going to come on that show. Of course, if you want to contact the show, it's the upper tier podcast at gmail.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, everywhere. Audio is Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music. My friend, an absolute pleasure, and we will be back during this week with more shows. Cheers, pal.
Thanks, buddy.